Angkor Wat.
You know, I'll tell you, it is kind of crazy how all that happened because, you know, I'm from Corpus originally. I grew up down there and lived there till I was like, I guess 12. And then my mom got remarried and we moved to Houston for about 3 years and then moved to Austin by the time I was in 9th or 10th grade, something like that. And that's kind of when I started getting involved in the hardcore scene here in Austin. I guess it was kind of more the punk rock scene back then because it must have been like 77 or 78. And so all that was kind of new. And then as things were going on, like I learned to play guitar by listening to that first Ramones record. Like I always wanted to play guitar before that, but the stuff that I listened to, it just seemed too complicated. I guess I just didn't have enough belief in myself that I'd be able to do it. But then I heard that Ramones record, and I thought, fuck, I can do that, you know. And so that's kind of how I started playing. And I ended up in my first band I got kicked out of. This kid, someone introduced me to this kid, said he was a badass drummer, and when I met him, he looked like he was about 9 years old. And I was like, whatever, dude, this guy can't play drums. I went to his house, and I couldn't fucking believe it, man. He was like a total badass.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, he was actually older than 9, but he looked like he was 9. Yeah, we put a band together. We called it The Infected, and, you know, we were pretty serious about our drugs and alcohol and less serious about, you know, playing music. Although we did a bunch of gigs, dude. We fucking opened up for Minor Threat in Austin and in San Antonio, and, you know, played with, of course, with the Dicks and the Big Boys. And, you know, we did a lot of shows, and eventually I started getting into a lot of trouble, and so I was like, man, I gotta make some changes. And I was homeless, so I moved back down to Corpus because my dad still lived down there, and I was, you know, going to school a little bit at Del Mar, and I was bored because I wanted to do something, you know, musically. I mean, I was getting sober, basically, or trying to. And while I was doing that, I was, you know, sitting by myself playing guitar a lot, and I was getting better at playing guitar because I wasn't so fucked up all the time. And I didn't really know that many people, so I just, like, spent a lot of time playing guitar, and I got better. And eventually what I did was I bought a bass, try and find someone to accompany me, you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's when I ended up meeting up with this kid that lived across the street from me, Danny, and I taught him how to play bass so that he could play, and, you know, I could just write music and, you know, have someone to jam with. And that's kind of how he and I started. And then we met David Brinkman and Mike Trevino at a show at the Rip. And I'm not sure I remember which show. It might have been Motorhead and the Cro-Mags.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think it might have been that show. So at the time, there was really nobody into hardcore in Corpus that I knew of. There was a few metal bands, like, trying to remember what the name of the metal band had Dave from Devastation was in before Devastation.
Huh.
And I remember seeing them open up for like Metal Church or someone like that in Corpus. There was a few bands that were kind of almost like new wave of British heavy metal type shit.
Uh-huh.
But there was nobody doing anything like super hardcore,
Yeah.
And so at that Cro-Mag show, at the Motorhead show, when I saw this guy with a mohawk, I was like, who the fuck is that guy? I haven't seen him around. And that was David Brinkman, who was a couple years older than me. He and Mike getting together with him somehow. I guess we went over to his house, and he had this, like, fucking incredible record collection. And also, Brinkman had this, like, amazing horror film collection. And I was really into movies. That was kind of one of my favorite things. So we hit it off right off the bat, and eventually we found a drummer, Chris Choppa. I forget how we even got a hold of him or found him, but that's how Angkor Wat started. And I think the first time we played, we did a show with Devastation, but before I talk about that, I want to say that, our goal was really nothing more than to just, like, get in a room and make loud noise. Like, we had no intention of playing shows or, recording albums or anything like that, just because, A, there was no place to play in Corpus, and B, nobody was into what we were doing, so we thought we were the only 5 guys in all of Corpus that were into hardcore. And then we did end up playing the show with Devastation. I forget how we met Rodney Dunsmore.
Yeah.
He was like, I forget how we met him, but somehow we ended up hooked up with him, and he was like promoting shows, and he brought down, I think, Rotting Corpse and Devastation and us. We all played this show together, and it was like, I couldn't believe I saw all these kids, long hair, Slayer t-shirts, and I was like, okay, so there's starting to be a scene here. But the funny thing is like the next time we played, which was probably a month or 6 weeks later, we did a show at rented out like a Knights of Columbus Hall or something like that. And about 50% of those kids that had long hair and had Slayer t-shirts now had mohawks and Exploited t-shirts, you know what I mean? So there was kind of a scene developing. It was kind of cool because, at the time we were doing kind of a crossover thing, just primarily because, if you get better at your instrument, you can't just keep playing the same, 5-chord song. You know what I mean? So eventually things get a little bit more interesting, and that's kind of how Angkor Wat started. Because I had spent so much time, both away from Corpus and in Corpus. I mean, I had a lot of different influences and had traveled a lot, as a kid. But I always came back to Corpus because, my dad lived down there, so I'd go down for summers or, spend weekends with him, once a month or whatever. So it was like this weird fucking clash between the real world and then going to Corpus, which was like this weird kind of ass-backwards fucking, place. I mean, it was just bizarre. Like, Corpus was really like 10 or 12, 15 years behind everywhere else I'd ever been, between Houston and Austin. And I mean, by the time I was 15 years old, I'd already been to Europe with my parents, my mom and my stepdad, and I'd been to Africa. So I had a lot of experiences that were kind of something of an education. You know, I'd seen a lot of different culture, and you know, when you go to Corpus, and I still had, you know, lots of friends that I grew up with there, and all they knew was going to the beach.
Yeah.
You know, which the beach is cool. You know, I don't have a problem with the beach, but you know, fuck, when you've seen, you know, I mean, the time that I spent about 3 weeks in Kenya, in Africa, East Africa, when I was 14, and going on this photographic safari, but we also spent some time just kind of hanging out in Nairobi, the capital city, and man, it's, you know, seeing that kind of people living in such a different way than, you know, what we were used to, you know, had a real impact on me, as well as spending time in Amsterdam. Like, the first time I, you know, went to Europe, the first place I went was Amsterdam, where, you know, it's just wide open, you know.
Yeah.
Weed is legal, and, you know, it's a very different scene. It's real liberal compared to, you know, and there's a lot of art, and there's a lot of music, compared to, you know, Corpus, where I grew up, and where there was very little art, very little music. I mean, like, I can remember being a teenager and going to, there was like Battle of the Bands and stuff like that would happen, and I remember there was this one band that was super fucking badass. They were called Purple Mushroom. I mean, Corpus, you know, it's my hometown, and, you know, I love it there, but dude, there's some really negative shit about it. It's like way too, I couldn't live there because it's so fucking conservative, you know?
Definitely.
Yes. I mean, when you look at people and look down on them just because of their sexual preference, I mean, fuck, that's pretty hardcore. Anyway, but yeah, that's kind of my musical history with Corpus.
Yeah, there's always been a little punk scene going on, you know. Some bands have been around for years, but that's about it. How did you guys, Angkor Wat, how did y'all wind up in the studio to record?
Oh, man. Well, so it's kind of interesting how that happened. Somehow or another, like I said, you know, we didn't even have the intention of doing a demo tape or playing out or anything. And then we started playing some shows out. And, you know, back then, before, you know, the internet, people used to, like, trade tapes, and there was always, like, fanzines, you know, people would make, and people would write scene reports. Like, there used to be this one magazine out of California called Maximum Rock and Roll.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, that one, and in every issue, there would be, like, a scene report from, like, different cities with hardcore scenes, right? So I don't know even how it happened, but suddenly we start getting offers to be on compilation albums, like New Renaissance Records. That chick wanted us to be on one of her compilation albums. Metal Blade wanted us to be on a compilation album. Like, all this stuff like that was happening, and so we thought, fuck, what do we do, you know? And but the only thing we knew was that that guy Walt Traxler from Rotting Corpse, he had, quote unquote, produced Rotting Corpse's demo tape, which sounded pretty cool to us. So we brought him down to take us into this little bitty studio. Fuck, I can't even remember. It was at somebody's house. Like, it was a real studio, but it was, like, built in their house. And Walt was there literally for about 20 minutes. before he got in a big fight with the studio owner, and he just split. So we were kind of stuck there, going, we have no idea what the fuck we're doing. I'd never been in the studio before, and I don't think any of us had. So the guy that owned the studio, who was kind of like this, he was a nice guy, but kind of a redneck, you know. He recorded, you know, our, whatever, 3 or 4 songs, and that was our first experience in the studio. And I think that was the first demo that actually got us signed with Metal Blade. But we had, you know, I remember we had an offer from Capitol Records, this chick, wow, Rachel Matthews, yeah, who I later met. Because it was weird, because at the time, you know, Metallica had hit, and they were like, their second record was, the Ride the Lightning record was pretty big. And so everybody was trying to sign, you know, all the labels were trying to sign heavier bands.
Yeah.
And Capitol Records wanted to sign it, but, you know, my thought was, fuck, we're not good enough. You know, we'll get lost on that label. You know, you know, we'll do one record with them and they'll drop it. And actually, after we turned them down, I think they signed, that same chick signed Rigor Mortis in Dallas.
So it was a conscious decision to go with Metal Blade?
Yeah, you know, because like I said, the Capitol Records deal was, it just seemed like too big, too overwhelming, and then there was other smaller labels like New Renaissance. They wanted to sign us, and I think there was a couple others. And then Metal Blade. Oh, I'll tell you what happened. Like, I haven't thought about this in a million years. Let me see. It was the very first South by Southwest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And William Howell kept calling us and, you know, calling me and trying to talk me into, you know, signing with them. And he's blah, blah, telling me, you know, all this stuff, talking all this shit. And, you know, he seemed like a nice enough guy, but he also sounded like I was wary of people that worked at record labels, because they were all, as far as I knew, they were all like business guys, and they weren't musicians or whatever. And this guy sounded just like that. He was like, sounded like this nerdy little dude. I could totally picture him, nerdy little white guy with glasses, right?
Oh, shit.
Well, when we met with him up in Austin at the very first South by Southwest, he was not what I expected at all. He was like this 6'6" black dude with long ass dreadlocks, who sounded like a little white guy, just a total nerdy guy. Anyway, long story short, he ended up talking us into signing with him, with Metal Blade. And, you know, the reason that we went with Metal Blade is because they were putting out all the cool shit at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and they seemed a little bit more personable than the people that we had talked to, like, from New York. You know, people in New York, they're very short and they're abrupt, and they just didn't seem as cool as, like, these Southern California guys from L.A. who were, like, much cooler and, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how we ended up signing with them. So we did the first Angkor Wat record, and we did that with this guy, Kerry Crafton. I don't even remember how we ended up getting turned on to Kerry, but he had done, like, a bunch of stuff with friends of mine, like Scratch Acid. He had recorded them, and I forget how we got turned on to him, but we did. And so we went into the studio in Austin and recorded the first record with him, and it came out badass. We were, like, totally thrilled with it. And then after that record, we were getting ready to do the second record, and we were kind of getting more serious about music, or at least I was. You know, up to that point, I was like not really sure that was going to be much of anything other than a kind of a side thing, you know. But with the success of that, and you know, meeting all the people that I was meeting and stuff, I just got really into it, and so we did the second record, and that was when Dave Brinkman, about 6 weeks before we were going to go in and do that record, he bailed. And I think that it was probably due to the fact that, you know, he and Mike both had kind of serious jobs. So they had, you know, serious jobs and shit. I was just like a fucking student. You know, the rest of us were just like college students. So, you know, we didn't have anything, you know, no bills, no responsibilities. We could just go, you know, do whatever the fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And so that second record, I did all the lead vocals on it, and it wasn't because I wanted to, because I didn't. I fucking never had any desire to sing or be the lead vocalist. Never.
Wow.
And in fact, I had never even practiced singing until I stepped in front of the mic to record the vocals for that for that second Angkor Wat record.
It's just a scarecrow promotion. Black out emotion, splatter on my floor. I'm black and bloody, cold and drowning. I'm tortured by the lack of you.
Oh, I forgot about this too. We had even talked to the singer from The Accused, who had just broken up.
Oh, really?
About, yeah. He was like, the only thing that kept him from actually doing it was that he had a girlfriend and she didn't want to move to Texas. On the first album, I think I wrote about 50% of the lyrics anyway, so I was already writing stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, then I had to end up getting, you know, actually singing it, and I had no fucking clue what I was doing, but, you know, I did it.
Oh, yeah, dude.
And then we were going to do a third record. And on the second record, we used a little bit of programming on a couple of different things. Like, we did this intro that was all electronic. It had started out at Del Mar, and I did radio and television production there. And when I transferred from there to what's now called Texas A&M at Corpus Christi, I was focusing on film, right, communications, but with a focus on film. And they had a shit film department. They had no film department, basically. It was minimal, just a few classes. So they basically let me write my own degree plan. And so I was doing like this kind of experimental film shit, you know. What I was doing was, in order to create the soundtracks to the film pieces that I was doing, I was using like 2 jam boxes to create what we now think of as loops, right? Yeah. But at the time, I didn't know what a fucking loop was. I was just taking a sound and I, you know, record it from one tape player to the other one just for a second. Then I'd re-record it again and bounce them back and forth to create what are called loops now. And so after doing that for a while and creating, you know, these video pieces and creating these soundtracks, suddenly the technology kind of caught up with what I was doing. And I remember going into Sound Vibrations, which was the music store that I did all my business at in Corpus. And
oh, yeah.
They were all friends of mine. the guy that was in the keyboard department said, dude, you got to check this out. And they had just got the very first sampler. Yeah, it was crazy. Like, then all of a sudden it became a reality that we could, and I was thinking the whole time, this is like, if only there was a way we could add this to the music, it's like, it would give us another kind of color to add to the palette to create these, musical pieces or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it all came together. And so on the second Angkor Wat record, there is some electronics and there's some, and in fact, that was the first time anybody referred to anything that I had done as industrial metal. Like, I remember there was a review, I don't even remember what magazine it was, but there was a review and they called it that, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time because I wasn't really into, quote unquote industrial at the time. So, yeah. And then Danny got really into, he was always kind of into stuff like Depeche Mode and, stuff like that.
Yeah. More
so than I was. And so he was wanting to put more keyboards in. And, between the two of us, I think he ended up getting a sampler. We used this, the first sampler we used was this giant fucking thing. It was like, weighed 100 pounds. It was made out of metal. It used floppy disks. And I think it had like 1 megabyte of, RAM in it. It was just crazy compared to what they have now. And, so that's what we used to record, the second. We used that on the second Angkor Wat record to some degree, just a little bit here and there, but like the intro, that's all electronic. And then when we came time to do the third Angkor Wat record, we had demoed a bunch of the new material for the label, because they always want you to demo the material that's going to be on the record so they know what they're going to, give you money for. They don't want to just suddenly have you go, bluegrass and pay for a bluegrass record, right? They want to know what they're giving you money for. And so Danny had gotten this Ensoniq sampler, which was kind of the newest thing at the time, and we recorded a cover, Sympathy for the Devil. Metal Blade was like, holy shit, this is fucking, they were like blown away. And they were so excited, I thought, well, maybe this is our opportunity to renegotiate our recording contract, because we had a shit recording contract because we didn't know what we were doing when we first signed.
Yeah.
So we renegotiated the contract and got a little bit better of a contract, not much. But then when we started what became the first Skrew record, we were still called Angkor Wat. And in fact, I have those 2-inch reels, and they're labeled Angkor Wat. They don't even say Skrew on them because we didn't even change the name of the band until we were 2/3 of the way through that record. And we just started thinking, there's only 2 of us left, and it's so different. Maybe we ought to just, I never liked the name Angkor Wat anyway, and I'm the one that came up with it.